Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode. Today with me I have Chrissy Calabrese, Vice President of Product Marketing at Playvox, and we are set for a conversation around AI, the future, digital first, around automation. So it's going to be a very well packaged conversation. So stay tuned, let's go. The episode today is sponsored by Playvox, Workforce Management Essentials for the Modern Contact Center. But more on that later. Hi Chrissy, how are you doing?
Great. How are you today, Andre?
I'm doing well. Excited about our conversation today because it's about the topic that I think is on top of every single one's mind nowadays from multiple angles, multiple industries touching on the new era and what digital can bring, AI can bring. So really excited to have you joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We normally start with one question to set things straight in terms of the ground for the community that is very well focused on workforce management. So I wanted to ask in your own words, what does workforce management mean to you?
Well, workforce management is really everything you're doing to manage your workforce. It's your people, it's your processes around having the right people in the right place at the right time. It's forecasting their schedules and looking at their preferences and figuring out when they're available and who has the right skills and of course adjusting in real time based on what the business needs. So it's really everything around how you manage your people.
And based on your background, so you have been in this industry. I think you saw all shapes and forms of what workforce management as in previous conversations we have been speaking about working in a digital era first. What does it mean? What kind of trends and kind of setting the landscape for what we have. And I wanted to take the time to really ask questions about what do you think that are the use cases for new technologies and these digital era first concepts? If there's anything you tips that you could share, so everyone listening, I think please stay tuned because I think this will be an interesting one for you to take notes. And I wanted to start with kind of a setting the ground question, which is how do you rate, based on this specific concept of being able to embrace digital first, how do you
Mhm.
rate the maturity of this industry today? And by industry, I mean service in general, but as well workforce management. And how much do you think we can still expand from that maturity based on what's to come?
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is a complicated question because I think, workforce management in its entirety is a very mature piece of the market because it's all about focusing on your people. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. Any business that has started, they have people they need to manage. So at a high level, it's very mature. But when we specify about the digital age, I think that is where we have a lot of room to grow. Most workforce management solutions have been built based on assumptions that are no longer the case. And that's that a single customer is talking to a single agent at the exact same time. That theory is gone at this point because, especially with COVID, that accelerated and propelled digital into the future. So now businesses have to think about these asynchronous conversations where there's one to many and there's multiple steps it takes. And I think the WFM solutions that exist today have a lot of work to do to figure out what that means. And I think the digital world and the way COVID has changed things for how we communicate with businesses and what we prefer, it's found a lot of inefficiencies and flaws in some of the existing solutions and the way that we're thinking about it today. So it's causing a lot of people to kind of rethink what we're doing.
Yeah, and one of the examples I used to say this back, I don't know, 2015. So it's been a long time, and I always use you probably remember when Waze popped up, so the GPS navigation system, where Waze brought in something that was at the time very disruptive, which is to users could identify, okay, there is an accident here or some kind of traffic, and you would be routed based on whatever feedback you were getting. And I always use this analogy on for service. But you said that concept of we are in one-to-one interactions, and what you want is to provide the best way for the customer to solve their issue from point A to point B. And if that can mean rerouting you to a different channel because you are busy on a traditional channel, and making that a synchronous conversation basically opens the doors for all sorts of new technology, as well as new ways to provide service and new ways to amaze customers, even if it's in the physical world or in the digital world,
Absolutely.
as we stand today. what what role do you think that technology has to play in the modern service providers like contact centers and specifically the OFM for over the past few years in how it is today?
I mean, it's obviously had to change a lot because, the digital world and the way we want to communicate, it has to be more flexible. Customers want to communicate with businesses on, when it works best for them. And I think that's a big change that happened as we introduced the digital world. They want to have that work-life balance and be able to have a chat with a business that maybe they have a problem or a question or inquiry with, all while they're still in their normal workday. So I think modern technology has had to evolve and be ready to handle that type of communication and still provide that exceptional service. They don't Customers don't want to hear that you're not ready. You don't know how to deal with it. You don't have the right person that can handle my inquiry because it's the wrong time of day to do it. So, I think that is something that's had to change. And also from an AI perspective, it's really starting to take things in a different direction. I think there's a lot that workforce management solutions can gain from incorporating AI into their products because it's such a manual piece right now. WFM, there's so much manual human touch, and I think that's going to have to evolve.
And I think that's clear that we started by speaking about AI, and everywhere in every single industry, people are questioning themselves like, what does this bring? And I had a conversation the other day where we were speaking about how the internet actually created disruption when Google started, and now suddenly you have access to things that you don't need a book in before you had to search for books or search for someone. Now I think it's a different level, same kind of revolution, and I think embracing for sure will improve either the skill set or shortening traditional paths that you would normally have X amount of manual interactions. Something you said that sparked me a question on. I think we are still on that route of we need to embrace more change. Is there anything in particular that you start seeing that will lead to, like, I don't know if there's a specific use case that where technology is creating challenges and changes on how we provide the current services?
So changes on how technology is going to kind of embrace this change. I'm seeing again a lot of the AI coming into play. Whereas AI is being used to identify the types of people that need to be hired that have the right types of skills to reduce and improve that hiring process. Because in order to create an exceptional experience, you have to have the right people in place. And I think businesses are struggling to figure out what are those right characteristics, and they're often leaning on AI to help them improve that hiring process so they can bring people in that are well suited for the positions they need based on how customers want to communicate. So that's one way where I think technology is kind of embracing the change that hasn't been used before.
And that's a good point. You mentioned about the struggle to figure things out.
Mhm.
What do you think that are the key challenges that organizations are facing to adopt kind of that digital workforce management solutions and that digital landscape that is now evolving? What key challenges do you think they are facing?
I think that one of the biggest challenges is this is not about calls anymore. I think they are really struggling to embrace how these asynchronous, one to many, multi step conversations are different and how they can accurately predict the staff they need. Tools that are built for calls or basically using averages or tweaking their calculations to try to figure out staffing needs are just not producing accurate results. And I think what that's doing is creating an environment where you're either completely overstaffed or you're understaffed, and ultimately that goes back to the customer experience and what they're feeling. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I mentioned the hiring challenge. Is they're struggling to understand what are the skills. What is the difference from a person that is well, you know trained and ready to handle a conversation live one-to-one versus one that is handling multiple chats at the same time and trying to remain professional and provide excellent service. It's a different type of hiring, and I don't know that they're ready for it yet, especially ones that were slow to embrace digital and then were kind of forced into it with COVID. Customer expectations are higher than ever. We're in a mode where businesses are working to retain customers, and that's, retain and grow, because we're in this economic downturn. So they hold the ball in the game, and they expect us to be ready, and they don't care if it's different. They want us to adapt, and I think that's where businesses are really struggling.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think that probably resonates with a lot of people listening, and especially with so many use cases, that change and the need to embrace that change, regardless. I don't think there is one size fits all, but I think we need to adapt because the customers are getting that experience from other services they get provided too. So if you don't adapt, you will struggle for sure. So we spoke briefly about AI. There is many things that I think AI can do for us. You mentioned about removing manual interactions. What do you think that will be the impact on the customer experience, and what kind of role does workforce management play in that future?
Yeah, I mean, I think customers expect that true omni-channel experience. They want you to know who they are. They want you to understand their needs, and they don't want to repeat themselves 20 times. It still blows my mind when I call into a business and I input all my security information, my social security number, my name, my account number, everything. And I get to the first person and they ask me for all that information again. So, I feel like we should be better at that. And I think that's just a
Why
true
do you think that happens? And actually, that's a very good point. Sorry to interrupt, because I think I never saw that not happening.
right. I can't, and that and being as close as I am to the technology and the way things are advancing, it still blows my mind that happens everything. And I honestly think it's a disconnect. It's a disconnect in the way our systems talk to each other. So when we talk about a true omni-channel experience, the systems that are in a business should all be communicating and sharing information. And that is where AI comes in, because it makes your existing systems and solutions smarter, right? It's sharing the data. It's offering suggestions about how to best service this customer. It's understanding the history of, this is the third time this customer has called in. Maybe you should not transfer them 6 times. So and that's where AI makes things smarter. It's constantly analyzing the data we have. So, I think my opinion is there's so many disconnected systems, and the integrations between platforms is just not where it needs to be yet.
Mhm.
And I feel like this isn't a hard thing to figure out. So I feel like we should get there soon. So,
Totally agree with you, and that resonates a lot. And what is the role? I think the only thing missing is, what is the role that you think that whenever that future comes, that workforce
mhm.
management can play in that
Yeah,
in that space?
yeah, and I mean, workforce management is all about, who we hire, the work they do, the skills they possess. Do we have the right people? You know, it, it's, and I think that's where workforce management will play a role. It's going to be able to identify who is a top performer with certain skills to feed back into, an AI engine to say, hey, when I need to hire for this position, this is the type of person I need, and it can drive that. I think it's also going to help, offer up suggestions about, again, how do you best service these agents, and when should they be scheduled, and, what are the right flexible scheduling options that are available with channels, and how does that work across the asynchronous world. I really think that's where WFM is going to play a big role.
We spoke about how the pandemic kind of enabled some certain levels of the change, and one of the things that it enabled at a level that no one was prepared was remote working. It suddenly shifted from to remote working, kind of hybrid environments. We shifted, and we are getting that from automation a lot. So we are getting more and more virtual work being done by bots, which to a certain extent is work being done, and we should still manage and understand how does that impact our business and what does that represent, because if it's whatever reason that fails, there needs to be someone accounting for that type of work. What kind of steps do you think that companies should take to accommodate for those changes?
Well, I mean, at least for me, I've been working remote for 15 years, so COVID was no big deal for me from a work perspective. I still didn't have an office to go to. But I think, these companies, they have to be more flexible. And, when we're talking about workforce management, we're talking building schedules and forecasting a staff you need. Um, and something that comes to mind is the Uber mentality or the gig economy type mentality when scheduling, where you allow your employees to work smaller blocks of time, and the WFM systems aren't as rigid. The ones that are older, that have been around a long time, that are still looking at, I'm coming to work in an office and I'm working on calls and using that as their forecasting methods. They're a little too rigid to say, well, I want to just offer this employee this 1 hour block of time that they can give me, because they need to give their employees that type of flexibility, so they can still have that work-life balance, and they can, go to their doctor's appointments or take care of their kids, and have that option. So I think that's one of the ways WFM is playing in that role, and what these companies have to do.
Now, a quick word to our sponsor, Playvox. How many times have you said, I wish I could ditch this spreadsheet? Well, now you can. With Playvox, cloud native, easy to deploy workforce management solution, you can increase efficiency, reduce costs while keeping an agile and happy workforce. Use Playvox to forecast, schedule, and manage your workforce in real time. Want to know more? Go to our sponsor page at bwfm.com or click the first link in the description. Now, back to the episode. You mentioned something that really resonated with me about that, the priority shifting from having the employee and that work-life balance at the same level as a few other things that before like was totally different. Is there any kind of tips that you could provide more from a technology standpoint? Like, because one of the things I noticed a lot is people buying computers because they were not ready, they moving systems to migrating systems because like the systems couldn't operate at a level that they are not in the kind of like ready for VPNs, etc. So there are so many layers of this that I think it's hard to just summarize into one. Any tips on how to be prepared?
It's probably not a straightforward checklist, but I would think that, one of them is, are you cloud ready? I mean, you would think by now that most people are cloud ready, but that's not the case. There was a lot of apprehension around moving systems to the cloud and the security around the cloud and how that works. And, do I really want to allow my employee to work at home? So that was all removed with COVID. They had no choice. So I think at this point, that first checkbox of how do I prepare for the cloud and what do I need to investigate, it has been done. I think the other piece of it is that asking your employees about home environments, like what kind of setup do they have? Are they able to work in a place where they're able to get work done very, independently and not have 100 distractions? So I think the way companies can work through that and understand what the environments are is important. But from a technology perspective, I think looking for a system that allows you to make flexible rules and create, different easier options for employees that are more acceptable as far as scheduling and forecasting, and have some of that AI automation behind the scenes to help you create that automated schedule based on their preferences, based on their availability, based on their skills, it is important, and that has to be available across all
Mhm.
channels. So I think that's where the technology piece comes in. Is it flexible enough to kind of accept all those parameters and create something accurately for you?
I like that you touched on automation from that angle. One thing that I noticed is there is a lot of people that they might not be ready, like cloud ready or things ready, but what they see is like, okay, so let's bring someone that automates, and if we automate, then we are ready. And I think that doesn't work necessarily that way, because for you to automate something, there is some kind of set of alignment in integrations that need to happen, because automation is an enabler more than anything else. It doesn't solve necessarily the problem. Do you
Mhm.
still see that on people just assuming that it's okay, we just bring whatever buzzword as at the moment and we solve the problem and you just throw it on top?
Yeah, no, I absolutely, I do see it still. And you said it, automation can't fix the problem. It doesn't fix every problem. And I always say when people are talking about AI and, what should you do, not every piece of automation is going to fix your problem. It's really important for you to understand where you need automation, where are your bottlenecks, what processes are broken, where is there redundant steps to help you gain efficiency. So I think before anyone looks at AI across any of these platforms, they really need to have a true understanding of what are their processes and where are the gaps. Which breakdowns are creating a bad customer experience, and then look to incorporate automation or next best actions or things like that into their normal workflows so that they're actually getting to a solution versus just throwing automation in and hoping for the best.
Yeah. Is there any? I'm just curious. Is there any previous or recent experience you had service wise where you were surprised by how seamless that felt and that took advantage of technology and AI and automation eventually? Is there any recent experience?
Oh, I have to think. I've had some bad experiences, so
I mean, we can start with a bad one if you prefer. We can give the two extremes.
yeah. I mean, I've definitely had some, I had credit card fraud on my account. So I had to go through the steps of calling, closing my accounts and doing that. Like I said, I had the experience where I inputted like 10 different pieces of information, it felt like, and then someone gets on the phone and it's like, okay, can you verify this? Can you verify this? And who are you and why are you calling? I feel like I was like, I did this already. Like, I'm done. So, and at that point I'm upset and I'm stressed because I'm worried about this fraudulent
Mhm.
activity. And here I am again repeating myself. And at that time it was like 3 times I did it. So that was a bad experience. I've had some great experiences with TNT and using their online app where I was able to quickly, understand different plans that were available and do comparisons and just make a change and immediately I was done and it was very seamless. And I even at that point I transferred to a live agent from the app and finished my transaction. It was very seamless. So, I mean, that was a fairly good experience from an omni-channel perspective, but I probably have had more bad than good recently.
I mean, which kind of sets the scene that the actual opportunity is huge. Like I think we
Hmm.
are at the iceberg tip right now of how much it could be done. You mentioned one word that, if I recall, maybe 3 4 years ago was the biggest buzzword everyone was using, which is omnichannel.
Hmm.
And to be fair, I still have to see one completely seamless experience that goes for both sides, the
Hmm.
employee as well as the customer. Where do you think that the omnichannel is today? Because everyone knows speaks about automation, it feels like omnichannel is no longer important, but I think it's as important as it was a few years ago.
It is, and it was definitely a buzzword, and I think people get confused between multi-channel and omni-channel, and I think right now we're in multi-channel. These businesses have multiple channels and they don't
Yeah.
talk to each other, and that's the difference. Whereas omni-channel is a full seamless experience where these channels speak to each other, they understand who I am and what my problems are, and that carries through. I think we're very early on the maturity level of omni-channel, in my opinion. Although I do think as this market evolves. WFO is a very interesting space, and I've been in it for over 20 years. Um, but what we're seeing is that it's really coming closer and closer to these communication platforms. Like Zoom and Zendesk and Salesforce, and you're seeing these full platforms evolve, and they're tying closer and closer to the workforce management and the WFO and the WEM solutions that are out there because more people are recognizing that front end communication absolutely affects the employees and the employee experience impacts the customer experience. So having those two huge platforms be seamless and communicate together is important. And that's the only
Mhm.
way we're going to get to a full omni-channel experience. And I think some people have done more work on it than others, but for me, it's still a huge gap.
Yeah, and I love that fact, and let me just repeat it because omni-channel and multi-channel is not the same thing, and more channels does not make you omni-channel by any shape or form.
No, not
But it's
like
funny
you
that,
get to three, you're Omni. Like
yeah,
not how it works.
still to close kind of like this AI topic. So we spoke already a bit about kind of like where we are, some of the tips. In your opinion, what steps can organizations do now? We spoke about embracing change, but specifically to embrace this digital era and maximize their benefits of AI and in their workforce optimization strategies. What steps should they take?
I would say first step is figure out how your customers want to communicate with you because you don't necessarily need 6 channels. You need to offer the channels that your specific customers want to communicate with you. And I think that's one thing businesses are missing is they're just assuming people want to use email and chat. Whereas I personally I prefer chat over email. So understand that. I would also say dig into your solutions, understand how, the back end algorithms, how things are calculated, how are they estimating, measure your accuracy, keep a close eye on your forecast versus actual from a WFM perspective to know, are you producing accurate forecasts? Because that can be very costly to your business. And if you're not, you need to dig into the solution and figure out what's going to work for your business and your channels. Don't treat all channels equal. They are not. You need processes around everything, but they are not equal in the way that they're managed, in the way the people that you need and the skills that you need. And I think as far as your agents, it's really important to educate your agents on the channels and improve their skills around how to provide the best service. I think again a lot of assumptions are made that if you can create an email and be effective, you can also communicate on chat. And it's not necessarily true. So, if you truly want to provide that exceptional service, you have to do well by your agents. Now, as far as AI, I mentioned before, my number one suggestion is figure out where your bottlenecks are. Don't assume that every AI will fix your business and fix your problem and create a better experience. Understand your flaws, understand where your customers are struggling to communicate with you and to get service from you, and then look at ways that you can automate and reduce those redundant steps, or, have AI make suggestions to you about how best to service the customers.
Ooh, powerful. I think those last 2 minutes are very powerful for a lot of people struggling right now to make a next step. Like you said, you have been 20 years in this space. You saw all shapes of forms of channels evolving, and this omni-channel just as we're starting. Throughout this journey, who are the people that inspired you the most and why?
Well, I'll be honest, the people that inspire me the most right now are my kids, because I have three kids, and my oldest is going to be 19, next one's going to be 16, and one is going to be 11. So I have the full gamut of their where they're at in their lives. And these last few years has disrupted everything. And I watched them kind of handle it with so much grace and just roll with the punches and figure it out. They missed out on so many things, and they figured it out, and they got up. They were told, it's not safe to see friends and family, and how do you adapt to that? And I think they've come out better people in how they treat people, in how they communicate, and their work ethic. Everything has changed for them, and I they inspire me to do better and continue to kind of roll with the punches, because change is hard. So I'll have to say my kids on this one.
Yeah, change is not only art, but if you allow me, it happens everywhere, and sometimes
Hmm.
we don't even realize that is happening until sometimes it's too late. So definitely, definitely powerful. Still on the personal note, so not necessarily related with workforce optimization or this space, but if you could get 1 hour with anyone in the world for a lunch, with whom would you love to get that time for a conversation? And what would be that conversation about?
It's an interesting question. That's a tough one. There's a lot of people that I would love to sit down with and just pick their brain about so many different topics outside of work stuff. But I would say one person that really inspires me, and that I would love to have a conversation with, is Pink, who's a big, huge singer. She's very local to me. I mean, I'm right outside Philadelphia, so she's kind of a big thing here, but she's a working mom. She's so open and honest about her personal struggles and how she balances everything. She's a huge advocate for mental health and wellness, and she supports all these amazing organizations around, preventing animal cruelty and supporting human rights, and so many hospitals and children's organizations. So she's definitely someone that aligns to a lot of the passions that I have. And I would just love to hear from her about how she does it. Like, how is she such a force, and what her fears are, and how she feels about the world today, because I know as a working mom, and we're roughly probably the same age, that the world that I grew up in is so different than what it is now, and as a mom, it scares me. So I'd love to just talk to her about it and pick her brain about how she's handling all this stuff.
Yeah, you said one word that I just wrote down, which is fear. And I think that ties quite well with a lot of the things we spoke about change, about like
Hmm.
embracing, because many times we get stuck by fear.
Yeah.
We have the fear of change, we have the fear of not generating the right impact, and sometimes that leap of faith okay, let's try it, let's learn from it, and be better. I think that that's one of the things that I feel sometimes is missing back to the work environment in multiple levels of multiple organizations. What do you think we can expect from the workforce optimization industry in the future?
I think it's going to be AI, AI, AI. They're going to find ways that it's going to be inserted into everything we do, and I think that's the right strategy. Like some businesses are treating AI like its own little product, and it's really not a product. It's got to lay on top of everything we do, every solution we use, and make things smarter, make more automated workflows, make the agents smarter at how they're handling customer experience. So um, I think there's going to be a lot that AI does to look at all of the data. Because if you think about WFO, it's all about, how are we managing our employees? How do we create optimization with our process and our people? And that all comes from data. So I think the AI piece is going to start to really analyze all of that historical data to understand trends and employee behaviors and customer behaviors. And it's going to create more efficiency in how we handle the customer service space. So, I think that's where you're going to see a lot of change. I think our WFO and those communication platforms I mentioned earlier are going to become closer and closer. I think you're going to see some consolidation in the space around that because they have to become more seamless, and that's the only way it's going to happen.
Chrissy, what a way to end. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this conversation sparks people to change and look at what they can do to change and embrace this digital era that is here to stay for sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. The episode today was sponsored by Playvox. Go to wfm.com, go to our sponsor page, and get to know them better.